Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Servant RD, Ramat Kohaya, Kingdom of Heaven is at hand. Here with another installment of Words of Exhortation, which is entitled No Other. Simply No Other. Like I said, this is the first installment. And I'm reading out of Exodus, the 20th chapter, and verse 3. Well, let me start at verse 1. I read this all the time at the assembly, and I want to establish this passage for today's short message. Exodus 20 and the first verse, it says, "And Yahweh spake all these words, saying, I am Yahuwah, thy high power, thy Elohim, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage." Verse 3, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." I want to center in on that. The Father, in his infinite wisdom, the Father, being omniscient, wanted us to understand that we will be dealing with a slew, an array, an innumerable amount of gods and deities on our journeys as we sojourn to the land that he promised us. Our foreparents of that time, they understood that because they had left Egypt that had over 900 thousands of gods that they worshiped. They understood the Sovereign One. They knew who the Sovereign One was at that time. But they chose to serve and to stray away from the Most High and serve other deities. And so the Father dealt with them harshly. We all know the story and the back and forths, the boxing match against the Most High Yahuwah and the gods of the Egyptians, the deities that the Egyptians serve. And so we understand that. And so the indicator is that the Father gave us information, descriptive information, that we would be confronted by gods to the left, gods to the right, gods before us, gods behind us, gods above us, gods adjacent in every degree. We would be surrounded, the circumference of various gods. And the Father strictly told us that I don't want you serving no other gods. Now we are well into the season where the other gods and the other deities it's about to get mad worship. They're about to receive mad praise and homage. Rituals will be taking place on this day, October the 31st, 2020. We are witnessing, brothers and sisters, here in my area, in my neck of the woods, people are going all out. They have all kinds of shrines. They have all kinds of graveyards. And you best believe there will be rituals that will be performed. This is the season of death. That's what they call this. Samhain, which is Halloween, is really a year for the witches. It's a celebration of death. And this day, today, is the Day of the Dead. This is why they have skeletons. This is why they have all kinds of ghouls and goblins and ghosts. Ghosts represent a life that once existed inside of a body. And so I was at work on Friday, and a lot of people took off. Many people are in celebratory mode because this day, October the 31st, is on a Saturday. A lot of people took off. They were, I believe, getting ready. I know some of them told me that they were going to get ready for this huge celebration, this huge observance, if you will. Yet still, we as the children of Israel, the ones that the Father brought and delivered out of the house of bondage, he emphatically told us he do not want no other gods before him. When he looked out through the corridors of time and the plains in which we would sojourn, the Father do not want to see any other deities on that platform of our journeyings. And so, as we all know, many of the Hebrews, many of the covenant people, they have broken that commandment off. They broke it off with force, if you will. Not only are they celebrating, other gods, they celebrating during the time where the world is celebrating their dead. This day, a lot of churches will have trunk or treat, and they would do it at night. It still would be wrong, but it would be a little bit better, better wrong if they had their trunks or whatever have you, and giving out presents and gifts and candy while it's still daylight. They can't do that. They wait for the dark of night. They waiting for night to fall so they can participate along with the other nations. And this is what we must understand. This is the season of the witch, brothers and sisters. And you have all kinds of homages and all kinds of celebrations that's going on. You know, people burning cedar, people burning sage, practicing glamour magic and cleansing rituals, all to recognize the other gods. So therefore, we as children of the Most High, we cannot be caught up in that. I know that people say that this is the day for the children, but that's the biggest lie ever told. You and I both know that adults get more pleasure out of this day than the children. Yet the Father said, no other. And so as we see various influences of witches being projected throughout this day and throughout the night, we must understand all the missing children that have gone missing throughout the year. They would most definitely be sacrificed tonight. This is very serious, brothers and sisters. People that have been missing, I guarantee you, some of those people will be sacrificed tonight. This is a day of the dead. Remember that. This is a liturgy that is being practiced to honor Molech, to honor Minerva, to honor all these female deities, Artemis, Diana. They will be observed tonight. Yet and still, the Father said, no other. You have people that will be placing apples under their pillows. You have some Christian women will be doing seances and practicing white magic, using tarot cards and all type of devices to commune to energy of those that have gone before us. Something the Father said he did not want us to do, so that they can somehow, some way attract a husband. Yes, that's going on in the Christian church. I remember growing up in the Christian church, I remember going to this particular church that our church was associated with. In the basement, they had a haunted house. And deacons and some of the church brethren of that assembly dressed up like monsters and all types of creatures and had us running to and fro, scaring us. Now, some of us didn't know better. This is why Paul, when he spoke to those individuals, those philosophers on Mars Hill, and as a matter of fact, Mars is a god of war. So they named the planet after the god of war. And this god of warfare is a ruthless, villainous deity that taught men how to fight efficiently to win a battle so that he can get the glory. Yet the Father have already spoken, no other. Like I was getting ready to say, we was at the church and they were dressing up and they were scaring us, and we had a good time as kids. Like Paul told those philosophers on Mars Hill, he said, at this time of ignorance, Yahweh winked at, but now calling all men everywhere to repent. And so, brothers and sisters, this season where witchcraft will be turned up to high volumes, we must remember Exodus 20 chapter and verse 3. No other. And so as I think about some of the things that I've witnessed, like when I went down to New Orleans, and down in New Orleans was this mistress, Marie Laveau. We went to a shrine there in the French Quarter, and it was eerie. I watched it. I like, man, this shrine in the picture, you can feel the presence. This is why women love witchcraft. They get instant sensation because it's no different than when the serpent talked to Eve. She felt a sensation and saw that the food was the fruit on the tree was good for food. She took of it and ate of it. She was beguiled. And so women are being beguiled not for the sole purpose of them being deceived, but they are being finessed in order to penetrate that man. Whether it's through sex, whether it's through seduction, well, seduction will always lead to sex. But after sex, most men would give their power and their authority over to a deity that's working through that woman. Yet, the Most High said, no other. And so, through this time, you will witness people going up and down with their kids, taking their kids through the fire, sacrificing their kids to the gods of the night. The transmission of energy is on high levels at this time of year. The law of attraction, when you see the act of copulation rise to astronomical numbers during this time of year, because that energy must be transferred through people so that these deities, the one that the Father told us not to have before him, will get the recognition and the homage that they so vehemently demanding of their subjects. I remember when I was in France, I went to this church and it was eerie. I went inside this cathedral. It was cold. It was dark. Candles burning. I felt the presence of souls that were sacrificed in that place. I took a picture and put it on Facebook, and people made comments about it, that they felt a certain kind of way when they saw that picture. All types of rituals, all type of gargoyles and demons were inside the infrastructure of that church. It was eerie, I'm telling you, but it was an experience. When I started this ministry, my wife and I, we would go to different areas here in Missouri, in St. Louis, and surrounding areas, metropolitan and rural areas, suburbia, looking for a building to house our ministry. Several buildings I went to had dungeons. Buildings out in St. Charles had crypt areas in the basement, locked. And as we walked back, just examining the building for the possibility of purchasing it, as we walk in some of those basements, as we got closer to some of those areas, coldness of a aura of coldness just engulfed the whole area where we were. My wife, she stopped and she backed away. So we are living in the season, brothers and sisters, where deities are being worshipped. Children are being passed through the fire. When you look at the Egyptian Book of the Dead, that right there is a violation. But the Father told us that he did not want us engaging in necromancy, engaging in any type of divination. Speaking of divination, I'm reminded of Paul when he was going about preaching the good news. And this particular woman was following behind Paul, telling everyone in the region that these men are from the Most High. She was telling the truth. Well, she was using divination. And she had handlers that were gaining monetary rewards from her divination. Doesn't that sound familiar? You have so-called diviners going from church to church. You know, the Father, he shut that down with this COVID. He shut all that mess down. But you had at one time where they had gotten to the place where they were making all kinds of money off of people. To divine, to give them, tell them the truth of something. This is what the lady was doing. The lady, she was telling them the truth. They say these are men of Yah. And she kept repeating it over and over. And these diviners, that's what they did. They would go from church to church throughout the United States and around the world, repeating the same thing. The Lord said, I'm going to form a $10,000 line, and I want so many people to get in the $10,000 line. And I'm going to form another $5,000 line, and I want so many people to get in the $5,000 line. And I'm going to form a $1,000 line, and I want the majority of you, even though you may feel like you can't afford it, get in the $1,000 line. And the Lord will bless you. Diviners. Father shut that down. Just like Paul, he got irritated. And he looked at the woman, and she was repeating the truth. But the truth she was repeating, she was also gaining money. Because I believe, because the scriptures say that the men walking along with her and journeying and their crusade along with her, they were getting the money and giving her so much. So they were making money. So they probably was following Paul wherever he went. And she was talking and telling people about Paul. And then they would tell the people, come to us. We got a word for you. And so the Father moved up on Paul to get irritated with it. And Paul said to the woman, that evil spirit that was in her, come out of her. And it came out because Paul understood what the Father said way back in Exodus 20 and 30. No other. Saul, he understood perfectly that he should not be practicing anything that had to do with any other gods. But when the Father stopped speaking to him, what did he do? He went to the witch of Endor. And when he went to the witch of Endor, she conjured up a spirit, and the spirit told him the truth, that he would die. Yet still, the Father gave specific instructions that he did not want no other gods before him. Saul was tormented. He couldn't even get his own man to kill him. He fell up on his sword, and he still didn't die. Someone had to come, a Hamite, a Hittite, I believe, came and cut his head off to put him out of his misery. The Father, he take great vengeance when the individual put a God before him. Reminded of Manasseh, our uncle Manasseh, the king of Judah. He caused his children to pass through the fire, and he started worshiping other gods, and the Father caused his enemies and stirred his enemies up, and they came and sacked the city that Manasseh was king over and took him and put him in chains with thorns. And he had to humbly walk before all the people with thorns all in his body. Really, an example of what our brother Messiah would go through and what we would go through as we were in the fields, the cotton fields, being busted open with those thorns. Think about the wisest man ever lived, Solomon. How he loved all these different women, Hittites and Sidonians. And the first thing they did, remember, the women is an easier vessel. She's open. She has no protection, especially if she doesn't have a husband or a man covering her. I don't care how smart a woman is. I don't care how cute she is or how powerful she is or how high her IQ. That has nothing to do with the spirit realm. An evil spirit will enter just like it entered into that young lady, just like the evil spirit entered into those women that Saul loved. Let me read it for you before I close out. 1 Kings 11 chapter, first verse, it says, the king Saul loved many strange women, together with the daughters of Pharaoh, the women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites, of the nation concerning which Yahweh said unto the children of Israel, ye shall not go in to them, neither shall they come in unto you, for surely they would turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love. And he had 700 wives, princes, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For it came to pass, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with Yahuwah, his high power, as was the heart of David, his father. Check out verse 5. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, which is nothing but Diana today, which is the Statue of Liberty, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites, which is Minerva. Minerva is a god of war, a goddess of love. Brothers and sisters, we see examples. The Father plainly and emphatically told us that he didn't want these things and didn't want us to engage in. You can read the rest, but if you drop down to verse 14, this is what the Father did. And Yahweh stirred up an adversary unto Solomon, Hadad the Edomite. He was of the king's seed of Edom. For it came to pass when David was at Edom, David fought him off, but he got away, but the Father stirred him up and he came after Solomon. Just like the Father sent and stirred up I think it was the Babylonians to come after Manasseh. And they brought him into the place with chains and thorns. And so, as we are in full throttle of the season of the dead, season of the witch, the celebration of death, remember Exodus 20:3, thou shalt have no other. And like Paul told those at Mars Hill, he said, at this ignorance, y'all winked at. But now he's calling all men everywhere to repent. That means to turn. The first commandment is you should not have no other. And that's this first installment of no other. I'm your brother, Servant R.D. Ramont, signing off. Shalom.